In this part, we will see how to define a project and how to do the estimation activity for the project. I am in the what we call as the job card, which is nothing but the project master screen, where this is project ABC Towers with the job number J0001, and it is done for a specific customer, ABC Realtors, and the job posting group decides the various accounting treatments done during the project's execution. I have WAP cost account, accrued cost account, invoice account, sales account, and all that. And as you can see, this is a lookup to my chart of accounts where I can associate various WAP accounts. And the commonly available WAP methods are supported in the software: cost value, sales value, cost of sales, and percentage of completion. And the status, you will typically keep it at planning or quotation during the tendering process, and when a project is awarded, you will update the status to order. Only when the status is order, you will be able to book item or resource utilization against the project. Duration, you can specify start date, end date, but I will show you later where we can specify start date and end date for individual activities. The WIP recognition, this is where various WIP cost and the sales amounts get automatically updated as and when we post WIP entries. We capture certain information about the project, what is the location of the land and which land bank it is associated with, and all that. Customer billing, how we would be billing to the customer. NAVBUILD supports both progressive and milestone basis of billing the customer, and we can also specify when we will get paid for materials, whether it is upon consumption or during site delivery. We can specify that advance percentage or a specific value. Retention, which is very common in the project industry, which is kept retained by the customer for the purposes of warranty. Administrative charges, which get deducted by the customer before paying us. And next is what we call as the OHP coefficients, in deciding the price to be quoted to the customer after we do the zero cost based budgeting. There are three variables: O for overheads, H for handling charges, and P for profitability. And this profit you can either specify as a single margin at the project level, or you can specify at item level or resource level. I will also show you later how to override this margin calculations based on certain individual item or resource level as well, in order to revise the estimate of a project. NAVBUILD supports earned value analysis. This is a common mechanism prescribed by Project Management Institute in the US for calculating the schedule and cost variance of a project. So if you see any negative value in these two schedule and cost variance fields, that would basically mean that the project is behind in terms of time as well as in terms of cost. We can specify certain defaults, how our subcontractors will be billing us, what is the billing type. Again, progressive and milestone basis are supported, and how do they bill us for them to supply the materials, retention, administrative charges, and all this. Next, we will see how to specify the work breakdown structure for this project. In this case, this is the work breakdown structure. This is built like a tree structure, so we will be able to have any depth of WBS, and When we say begin total, end total, that basically means it's a logical combination of related activities together under a common heading. The advantage of specifying the end totals is you will be able to specify the range in which we will have to sum up, and the system will basically add up the budgeted cost and the price figures, so we will be able to see at a single glance of what the overall budget is and what the actuals are. Whatever you see under contract is basically the actual figures which are booked into this project so far. We have flags such as tendered, which basically means it is part of the initial planned activity, and you can specify handling charges either by itself or in relation to another activity. In this case, for example, the column concrete at the ground floor is having a handling charges of 7.5%, whereas when it moves up from first floor to second floor, in relation to the activity 10080, we will have to load another 5% on top of it, and that is the meaning of reference job task number. The meaning of the field source basically mean whether a particular activity is going to be done in-house or outsourced, which means it's going to be subcontracted, or partial, which will allow both own resource consumption as well as subcontracted resources. These planned start date, planned end date, actual start date, actual end date fields correspond to the timeline planning of the activity, which I will cover in a few minutes. Next comes the BOQ or the rate analysis, which gets attached to the activity. So in this case, what we are saying is this is the composition of items and resources required to complete this particular column concrete activity, and this is specified for 1 cubic feet, and right now it is at a status of certified, which means it is frozen and it is used within project. And as you can see here, this has so many items which are used and what is the unit cost, and the total cost gets rolled up here. You'll be able to specify it for a different unit of measure. This would be useful when as a company you would use one particular unit of measure and your customer wants to have the estimate in a different unit of measure. And there is also possibility where you can specify a particular rate analysis as a master rate analysis, or it can be made specific to a project by copying this BOQ record and make it specific to a particular project. This again could be useful when a company executes various projects in a particular location, and when they start to execute a new project in a new geography, maybe their cost will vary. What they can do is copy the master rate analysis info and make it specific to that particular project. So since we have now estimated the individual item and resource composition, the moment we specify the overall quantity, system will multiply it and arrives at the budgeted cost. Now all this totals up, and we will be able to figure out what our internal cost of executing this project is going to be and what is the price we should quote to the customer. And this is how the overall estimation is done for a particular project. The next question obviously one would have is, how do I revise this estimate? Because estimates go through an iterative mechanism of getting revised based on customer request, or based on changes in specifications of items, or based on changes in scope of work, and so on. I will now show you how to change the estimate of a project. One particular mechanism is by simply changing the profitability. For example, in this case, I'm going to say instead of the 25% margin which I had initially hoped for. Customer has negotiated, so I'm going to go for a 20% margin. And when you change the margin, you have to recalculate the project margin, for which there is a report which when you run it would change the amount. Before I run this, I just wanted to show what is the current value. Right now it is at 104,704,000. Now I have changed it to 20%. I will now go and run this report. And if I refresh the screen, I go back to the same project. As you can see, the value has now changed. The next possibility is, how do I revise either the cost or the price to be quoted to the customer by changing certain key items. In this particular case, I am going to change the price of cement, which is, by the way, used in many activities of any civil construction. So instead of 268, say I want to move it at 275, and the unit price I'm going to quote at 330. Now once I made this change, I want to see what is the impact of this particular change. I go back to the job task line, which is nothing but the work breakdown structure, and I say recreate planning lines. The system will revise the cost of the overall items, and as you can see now, the project values again change because of the change we have made. So using these two techniques, you can vary the margin percentage, you can vary the overhead and handling charges, or you can vary the cost or the price of certain key items. And using the combination of these mechanisms, you will be able to revise the overall value of the project. The next task in our hand is, how do we plan for the project from a timeline point of view. We have addressed the cost estimation part of it. Now we need to address the timeline part of it. Towards this effect, we have integrated with Microsoft projects. This is a two-way integration. As you can see here, I'm under Microsoft project. When I click on add-ins, I'm able to see these two small icons. These are COM add-in objects which are developed by CTAS, which basically does the job of pulling data from NAV and bringing them into Microsoft projects. I'm selecting the company and I'm selecting the project, and I say import. This goes and reads the data available within NAV and brings it over here. As you can see here, this is the data I'm having there. I could make certain changes. For example, this activity, say it's dependent on activity 9, and this is on, say, activity 10, and I could make constraint as soon as possible, so that it will respect the predecessor which I have given. Okay, let me do that for this activity as well. Okay, now these dates which were earlier showing as March has now become January of 2013, and I can update the actuals as well. Say I managed to start this on only the 11th, and I finished it on, say, the 16th. Subsequently, the next activity also gets pushed and all that. So this is the power of Microsoft projects, where the cascading effect is automatic. And once, similarly, I can complete my entire plan in Microsoft projects, and I can push it back into NAV. The reason why we are pushing it back into NAV is we would want the entire procurement and the projects team to work in tandem. In a lot of organizations, what happens is various departments in the organization use the initial plan which was published, and they may end up procuring without realizing certain changes in the project. So this could mean loss of working capital for the company. So this is the reason why it is very important to make the updates and synchronize with Microsoft projects. Let me go back and see the changes I have made. For example, these are the changes I made for this activity, which is 11th of Jan to 16th of Jan. Okay, so this is how the basic two-way integration with Microsoft projects work. The next question which could come up on people's mind is, what happens when I go through these changes either in estimate or in timelines? Do I see the original project plan? That is possible through what we call as the versioning feature. As you can see here, now I am on version number 3. We can create a number of versions in the project. Simply say functions create versions, and the moment you say yes, system will create a complete archive of the various task lines and the necessary planning lines, which basically means the details of item and resources which is planned as well as which is actually consumed, as a mirror copy, and keeps it in another object for reporting purposes. So later on I will show you how to run budget versus actual report across versions, which could be very useful in understanding the impact of various changes which we could have accepted. So this completes the overall project estimation module. Just want to summarize what we have seen here is how to define a project, how to define the work breakdown structure for the project, how to estimate for individual activities, how to revise the estimate of the project by changing the margins or by changing the individual key items cost and prices, or by changing overheads and handling charges. So these are all the various mechanisms available to revise the cost estimate. And in terms of planning for the timeline, I have shown how the software integrates with Microsoft projects.